Okay, so now let's have a look at automatic scaling for your ASG. As you can see, we have three categories, so dynamic scaling policies, predictive scaling policies, and scheduled actions. So let's start with the simplest. So scheduled actions is when you want to predict, when you want to schedule a scaling action in the future, so you can create one, and then you say what you want the desired capacity or the min or the max to be, and then is it once, is it every week, every hour, is it based on a specific schedule, and so on, and then a start time and an end time if you wanted it to be done. Okay, so this is pretty cool, and this is allowing you to schedule based on events that you can predict and that you know in advance, because you know, for example, that you're going to run a big promotion next Saturday. Okay, next, predictive scaling policies is where it's going to be machine learning driven. So you need to scale based on a forecast. So you need to have a look at the actual policy and the actual scaling based on the past, and then it will have a look at a metric to look at, for example, CPU utilization or network in, network out, the application load balancer request count, or a custom metric that you want. And then you want to, for example, to have a target of 50% of CPU utilization per instance. And then you can set up some additional settings. But based on this and based on the actual CPU utilization for the past week, for example, then a forecast is going to be created and your ASG is going to be scaling based on that forecast. So it's not something I can demonstrate with you because I would need to enable this for a very long time, a week, and then actually have some usage on my application. But at least you see that predictive scaling policy is quite simple to set up. You just specify the metric you want and the target utilization, and then some machine learning will be applied for the scaling to happen. So the one policy I can demonstrate to you is the dynamic scaling policy. So let's go ahead and create a dynamic scaling policy. So here we have three options. We have target tracking, step scaling, and simple scaling. So let's have a look at simple scaling first. So here we have to specify a name, then a CloudWatch alarm, which is an alarm that can scale capacity whenever it is being triggered. So we need to create an alarm beforehand, but we'll see this later on. And so in case the alarm is being triggered, then what happens? Maybe you want to add 2 capacity units, or maybe you want to add 10% of your group, okay? And then add capacity units in increments of at least 2 capacity units, okay? So this is a simple scaling policy. So you can have a scaling policy that goes out by adding instances, or that goes in by removing instances here. Or you can have a set to action as well, okay? And next we have step scaling. So this is allowing you to set up multiple an alarm, and based on the alarm value to have different steps. To, for example, if the alarm is very, very high in terms of the value, then add 10 capacity units. But if it's high but not too high, add 1. This is the idea behind step scaling. But we'll set up a target tracking scaling policy because this is going to create CloudWatch alarms for us. So here's the name, target tracking policy, and it will track the average CPU utilization of a target value of 40, okay? And then I will go ahead and create my policy. So now what we're saying is that, hey, the goal of this ASG is to maintain the CPU utilization to 40. And in case then you go over, then please add capacity units. So to see this in action, we need to change a few things. So right now, the min and the desired is 1, which is good, but let's set the max capacity to be 3 or 2, whatever happens. The idea is that you want to give it a maximum that is greater than the minimum so that the capacity can go from 1 to 2 and then to 3. And so the idea now is that we want the CPU utilization of my auto-scaling group to be at a target value of 40. So if you have a look right now at the CPU utilization, it's going to be 0, obviously. So let's have a look at EC2. It's going to be close to 0 because, well, my EC2 instance is not doing anything. So what I want to do is to go to my EC2 instance, and I'm going to stress it to make the CPU utilization skyrocket to 100%. So I'm going to connect to my EC2 instance using EC2 instance connect, and then connect to it. And then I'll Google install stress Amazon Linux 2, because there's a few commands, and here is the command. So I will copy the first command in here, and then I will copy the second command to install stress. Here we go. So stress is installed, and then I just run the command stress -C4, and this is going to make the CPU go to 100% by leveraging 4 CPU units, by making 4 vCPUs being used at a time. So this should make my CPU go to 100%. And so what's going to happen is that in my monitoring of my ASG, in here, what I wanted to happen is to go see the CPU utilization to go to something very, very, very high, okay? And then in activities, I want to see a scaling action. And so that means that I will go from one instance to two instances. So what I'm going to do is just pause the video until, well, enough metrics are being captured, okay? And until we can see that the CPU utilization is at a very high value. And then we'll see how the target tracking policy works. So now I went into activity, and under activity history, it says that a alarm has been triggered, and due to the target tracking policy, then the capacity went from one instance to two instances. So if I go into instance management, as you can see now I have two EC2 instances due to the scaling. And if I go into monitoring and look at the EC2 level monitoring, as we can see, the CPU utilization went to a very high value, and therefore the scaling happened. So how do we know that the scaling happens? So if we go into automatic scaling, as you can see, there is a target tracking policy right here. And what I want to show you is the backend. So if we go into the CloudWatch service in here and go into CloudWatch, at the left-hand side, I want to go into alarms. So we need to go into alarms. As you can see, two alarms are created directly by the target tracking policy, okay? And one of them is called alarm high, which is to scale out, so add instances. And one of them is called alarm low, which is to scale in, so less instances. And so this one is looking at if the CPU utilization is more than 40% for 3 data points within 3 minutes, then go into the alarm state. And this one is looking at if the CPU utilization is less than 28 for 15 data points, then scale in. Okay, so this is the idea. So this one was in alarm, and so due to the metric itself going into the alarm state by having the CPU utilization going over that limit right here, well, it got triggered, and this made a scaling activity happen from my auto-scaling group, which in turn made a new instance being in service. And so now if I go here and I stop this command, and I'm not even sure that I can stop it, but if I stop this command, or let me just finish it, and to stop this command, I can probably go to my EC2 instances and reboot it. So I'm going to have a look at this one, I believe, and I'm going to reboot it. So reboot this instance, and I'm going to also reboot that one just in case. Okay, so this should make my CPU utilization go back to 0, and this should trigger a scale in action within 15 minutes. So I'm going to yet again pause the video in my ASG and see if by any chance within the activity, I see a scale in action happening. So I will pause right now. And actually, just because I wasn't quick enough, because the CPU still was high, then the desired capacity went from 2 to 3. So as we can see, yet another instance has been added. So this really shows the power of auto-scaling group. And now if I go into instance management, well, I'll have 3 EC2 instances, and I'm going to have to wait a little while until they're being terminated. So now let's go back into activity. And as you can see, more activities have been going on. So some instances have been terminated. So because the alarm went from the lower CPU end, then the capacity was set from 3 to 2. And then one more time from 2 to 1. And so if you go into your instance management, as you can see, one instance was already terminated and the other one is in the terminating phase. And so that means that your target tracking policy is working. And you can see this by going into this alarm right here. And as you can see, the CPU utilization went up and then it went down. And then as soon as it passed this 28% threshold, then it went into the alarm state, which means that your ASG will start removing instances, okay? So that really shows the power of target tracking policies. When you're done, please make sure to delete this policy and you'll be good to go for the cleanup. That's it. I will see you in the next lecture.